The Jets are currently going shark hunting, and it's been a real back and forth affair. How have the Jets looked against a brand new look, high intensity shark squad?
Your Locked On Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, we're checking in briefly on the first and I would say part of the second periods against the San Jose Sharks. This game's going to finish pretty late into the evening, early morning for my time zone. Some of you might be on the Pacific Coast if you are from the San Jose fan base or out that way. The rest of you should finish around, 12:30 in the morning. So wanted to give some early preliminary thoughts. It's been a fun game. I've actually really enjoyed the first 25, 30 minutes of this. And some interesting takeaways for the Jets in terms of how they've handled this team and, what has been going well in terms of the offensive production. Maybe some thoughts about a guy like Luke Schenn, who just got reintroduced into the lineup and, like Nikita Tripakov, both haven't exactly had the best nights. We'll chat about that. I also want to talk a little bit about the Jets PK, which actually got a bit of a workout tonight, and also talk a little bit about, the Jets' upcoming game against the Ducks. Both the Sharks and Ducks are much improved. They've looked a lot better. They're a lot more dangerous, and they present two kind of interesting challenges for Winnipeg here that normally you would not see coming from teams that were not that long ago at the bottom of the Pacific. Before we dive into all of that, though, did want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Obviously, FanDuel has a number of great offers, but if this is your first time and you're a brand new user, you can join in on the action by putting down a $5 bet. And if your first $5 bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to keep the winning going. Stay tuned to hear more about how FanDuel can help you win big during the NBA season. Now, like I said, first 20 or 30 minutes of Winnipeg versus San Jose, it's been a very back and forth affair. This game promised to be pretty different than Winnipeg's last few meetings with the Sharks. San Jose has always been one of those teams over the past couple of years that's just the proverbial schedule win. Most opponents walk into the Sharks arena or invite them in, and it's really not much of a contest. Even when San Jose maybe outchanced a team, their goaltending, their defending, whatever it was, ended up putting them well behind the eight ball, and it just didn't matter. Last year or two, though, the Sharks have started to turn things around. You're seeing the 5v5 game pickup. The offense has gotten better. They're just more fun. Celebrini, Smith, Makmadulin. I mean, there's a lot of interesting young players on this team that have started to really step up. And they do have a fairly veteran group here as well. You've got guys like Venberg and Reeves and a few others. Toffoli obviously moving to San Jose. So they've got players here that are experienced and have had some playoff success elsewhere. But generally speaking, pretty young team. And for the Jets, this proved to be a very interesting matchup early. Both teams kind of came out of the gate skating very well. The Jets had issues against the Kings getting to that slot area and creating offense. Tonight hasn't really been much of an issue. Winnipeg has definitely gotten in close. They've pinged off some really high danger chances from Nedeljkovic. There were at least one or two stunning saves from Ned that I could not believe the Jets didn't convert on. One was a shorthanded opportunity that I thought Nemesnikov was absolutely going to score, and somehow Ned read the pass and timed it perfectly, slid right across, and cut off the shot before Vlad ever really had a chance. And then Vlad later, had a dead center, basically point-blank opportunity that Ned somehow got off of his helmet. I think he had Velarde robbed earlier in the first period on a net front chance that, in the scramble, he, Scheifele, and Connor were all trying to put the puck away, and somehow it just sort of popped on top of Ned's pad and stayed out. So been a real interesting game for Winnipeg. The Jets generally have just been very fun, and defensively, not exactly the tightest. San Jose has had its looks, and everyone kind of knows that. The Sharks offensively have proven to be surprisingly creative, and it's kind of let off the backs of some of their young rookies who, maybe you look under the surface and you can kind of see that they're not necessarily winning maybe the expected goals battles or, some of the shot battles, but their individual creativity and their moments of excellence kind of lead to moments like where we saw Celebrini get an inside step between DeMello and Morrissey. He just recognized a gap, saw, the Sharks force a turnover inside their own defensive zone, and realized he had a good break through the neutral zone, a big stretch pass. He gets a breakaway, and it's, tied 1-1. Speaking of, a couple of really big moments here, Josh Morrissey, after the Jets were stymied a little bit early and could not get a puck to go in, ended up just getting a massive blast from Joe Mo, his second goal of the season. Really important for him to start feeling the back of the net a little more frequently. That kind of stuff, I think, builds confidence and gets him to hopefully a more productive state. He's been racking up plenty of assists, but like goal scoring is one of those things that he's just very good at. So nice to see him find twine and continue to be, as good as he's been over the start of the season. But yeah, for this first 25, 30 minutes, it was really fun. And I would say the Jets had the edge at 5v5. Would also say that the Jets PK was really dangerous, created a couple of really good looks. I thought that they limited the danger that San Jose was able to generate against them. And I want to talk a little bit more about the PK in general because it's one of the league's top PKs, should be first overall right now, thanks to a crazy percentage. But, there are a couple of interesting factors contributing to this unit. And with how injured the Jets have been and sort of the lack of foot speed, that PK has gotten a real workout. And it has, in my mind, kind of soared above expectations. So we'll chat about that in a little bit. But I did mention, tonight the Jets had a couple of returning guys back in the lineup. Chibrikov and Shen, after taking some time off, they are both back in. And unfortunately, noticing them in the wrong ways. For Shen, he struggles to get the puck out of the D zone, especially under pressure. And, some of his turnovers and stuff tonight ended up extending zone possessions and cycles that probably could have given San Jose some really good scoring opportunities were it not for some desperation plays and maybe a last second block or two that prevented it from being super damaging. Chibrikov, I like him, but he is kind of a walking penalty. He had a double minor that was a really reckless high stick. I think it caught Celebrini under the chin, maybe chipped a tooth. They reviewed it. It was a 4-minute double minor. Really frustrating. He's been taking multiple penalties in a lot of these games. For the 5v5 play that you're getting out of him, you just can't afford to have him taking this many penalties. And surely, the coaching staff's not going to reward that either. The rookies are already going to be skating on thin ice because the Jets lineup is already getting healthier. All these guys, for the most part, are waiver exempt, so they're going to go back down. And this stuff just doesn't really impress coaches, especially silly penalties like this where you just need to manage your stick better. That's what it is. I'm not going to sit here and rip through the kids because that's, maybe not fair, but, for a pro player like Chibrikov, he understands this is just not something that he can do. And it's going to put him in a tight spot when camp competition comes back next year. And even during injury call-ups this year, if he cannot make a more positive impact other than ending up in the sin bin. So hopefully that kind of, tapers down a little bit. If he can score a goal tonight or at least get a couple of good looks, I think that would sort of reinvigorate his confidence and get him going again. But the Jets overall playing a pretty strong game against the Sharks, hoping it turns out to be a win. San Jose is not an easy out like it used to be, but I do think the Jets come out on top. We'll check in later next week and talk about how this game ended up finishing, as well as, one of the bigger games this coming Sunday against the Anaheim Ducks. What a fun weekend of Jets hockey we have ahead of us. But of course, I want to chat a little bit about the Jets PK. That has been a huge part of this team's success. Want to talk about if it's for real or if maybe there is something else powering this team's sudden rise to the top of the special teams pile. We'll chat about that in just a moment. Let's be real, making excuses doesn't solve anything. We've all heard them before. It's just stress, I'm tired, or it happens to everyone sometimes. But when it comes to performance, sometimes your body just needs a little extra support. And that's where Rugiet comes in. Rugiet.com offers fast acting doctor prescribed treatments for ED, designed to help you stop making excuses and start making moves. Rugiet makes it easy to get started. You just connect with a board certified doctor 100% online, no awkward appointments, no in person assignments. It's all easy, safe, and private. And if prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly straight to your door. It's fast, simple, and private, all handled by real doctors. Visit rugiet.com/lockedonnhl to get 15% off your first order. That's rugiet.com/lockedonnhl. And don't forget to use our code lockedonnhl so they know we sent you. Rugiet, stop making excuses and start making moves. Hey, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us in tonight's episode as we're chatting a little bit about a couple of different things that have been going on for the Jets. Obviously, Winnipeg has been, one of the most penalized teams this year. And as a result, the PK has had to really step up and has been quite honestly surprisingly good. I didn't really anticipate that the PK would be killing off as many opportunities as the Jets have had. Obviously, the past couple of games, they've started to concede a couple more power play goals against. Not super shocking. I mean, you are putting the team under a lot of stress with the amount of injuries this team has had. And, Winnipeg is just not the fastest team. And so they tend to take a fair few stick minors, partly trying to stop plays, prevent rush counters and do some funky stuff. So, not the best, right? But it's just something that you have to survive. And this PK unit under Dean Chanot has really stepped up in a way that I think should make a lot of Jets fans really proud. Before tonight's game against the Sharks, they were hovering around 89-ish%, which is pretty dang good. That's good for fourth in the league right now. And given how many penalties the Jets have had to kill already, that's not really, any sort of slouching number, right? Winnipeg was at one point averaging like 4.5 penalties a game, and this was just like a week or two ago. Really, really high number of infractions and minors. I think a fair reflection of where the Jets roster is at. They were just struggling to kind of cope with, the speed that they're facing, but it hasn't really bitten them consistently. And already with the Sharks game, they've killed off a double minor. They've been perfect on the PK. And I think this year, when you look at the under the hood metrics, right, the Jets PK in terms of chances conceded, we saw some stats readouts, I think about maybe 5-6 days ago. And the Jets PK was more in the 23rd rank in terms of quality of chances and volume of chances conceded. And I think, when you consider that, that's actually really impressive. Look at who's playing on the PK, right? You have a lot of bottom six guys. You have Fleury, Stanley, Pionk, DeMello. You're kind of cycling through a lot of your depth defenders and occasionally some of your power killers as well, trying to make things work. And where I think the Jets have really made a lot of progress is pressuring opponents, right? When the Jets PK is aggressive, yes, you're going to give up a fair few chances. But look at the personnel you have. You don't really have that many elite penalty killers available to you at any time. You're down Sandberg. Lowry missed a fair chunk of time. He's only just come back the last couple of games. And so you've had to make do with, more of the Cole Koepkes and Morgan Barons of the world. And to be fair, they've all stepped up fabulously. This PK, I think, has done a much more impressive job than you might anticipate. So all that to say, this unit, I think, has really helped carry quite a bit of the load. But maybe one of the most surprising things amidst all of this is that Connor Hellebuck has been quite honestly fantastic on the PK. This is not usually one of his strengths. Anytime you have a lot of lateral motion and really rapid cross-lot passes or even, odd man situations, Helly has not always been the best at that. This year, though, he started off really hot. And I think part of that is because the kinds of chances the Jets PK have given up tend to be more from either sharper angles or, just ones where they haven't been screened as much. Helly's had good vision. And, the Jets penalty killers are applying enough pressure to shooters to where they're not exactly getting the best and cleanest looks. Sometimes they have to shoot from the point and try and hope for something a little bit further out, maybe a lucky deflection, a tip somewhere, something of that nature. You haven't seen as many just out and out clean looks for these power play units. And they will get them. Don't get me wrong. The Jets PK is not perfect. And I think, being 23rd or in that lower third of the league in terms of chances conceded is a fair reflection of what we do see in these situations. But compared to what I was expecting for this unit this year, especially with the number of injuries, I think to have a PK ranked this highly is really impressive. So overall, this unit has really stepped up, and it's been a huge help where the Jets' power play has maybe looked a little bit slower, hasn't been hitting pay dirt as often. I think the loss of Ehlers is starting to become a little more noticeable there. At 5v5, the Jets probably could have used Nick's scoring ability, but the power play especially has been an area where I think Ehlers and his roaming skill, his ability to be such a creative force in the perimeter, all that stuff I think has been noticeably absent, right? Davis Payne kind of was cooking with that unit last year, and because Perfetti went down early, we still haven't really seen what this Jets top power play is gonna look like. You've had, Iafallo on this unit at times. I think maybe Pearson has filtered in on one of these two power play units, probably the second one. And so the Jets have really had to make do with, most of the usual talent available to them in these special teams units, but there have been a couple of guys missing that I think Winnipeg was really banking on. So, yeah, you look at all of this and how Winnipeg has tried to survive, and it just comes off as really impressive. I think there's been a lot of fight from this team. Yes, you've got really one scoring line and a bunch of checking lines, but given how the regular season tends to be and what Winnipeg backs itself with when it comes to Hellebuck and Comrie in net, they've gotten quite a bit of value out of this group. So 9-4, regardless, it's a very impressive record. Even if they drop this game to the Sharks, 9-5 to start the season is nothing to sniff at, especially given who you lost and where you are. So I think it's a huge credit to the Jets coaching staff that they've managed to pull together some really surprising performances out of the guys. The PK, I think, is a huge asset in many ways. The power play, mostly pretty good. The 5v5 play, it's a little iffier, right? Against, quality teams, it's not always been there. But again, right, it's hard to be too mad about this when your goal right now, until everyone is back, is just to survive. Perfetti, by the way, shed his no contact jersey. He was in a white kit today, so that's a huge confidence boost, I would say, for this team. And hopefully, this coming Sunday, maybe he even gets back in the lineup. That would be fantastic. So for the Jets, things are looking pretty solid. You've got a real platform for success to build on. You're still in the top 5 of the NHL right now. And units like your PK are doing a really underappreciated job of just putting your nose to the grindstone, getting things done, and finding a way to make things work, even when the games aren't exactly Picasso's. I think that was Maurice's old favorite phrase. Sometimes Arneal has said something similar, or maybe it was Bones. We've had a lot of guys kind of talk about winning ugly because, the Jets have had to do that over the years. This team doesn't always have the craziest talent at every position like some of those other teams out there. But I think in many ways that sort of embodies and sort of gives you the spirit of true Winnipeg residents, right? This is a team that works hard, that fights for every shift. And I think we've really seen a lot of guys step up and try to do everything they can to keep this team going for as long as it can until reinforcements arrive. So a lot of credit deserved for the Jets coaching staff and for the individual players. I think that they have tried to really hold things together even when it's not been perfect. And all you can be is just proud of the boys for getting to this record. So hopefully they keep it up. And as everyone comes back, this team gets even better. They're going to have to get better fast, though, because one of their next opponents has, frankly, been one of the hottest teams in the NHL. It's the Anaheim Ducks, and they have been surprisingly good, despite, looking at a team that has shed some talent in Zegras. They've brought in some older players. They swapped out the coaching staff and brought in Quenneville. How has this team managed to get to this point? We'll chat about what to expect from the squad in a brief moment. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. And you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And for those of you who are really big stats nerds, this is your time to really stretch and flex your knowledge. If you think you know who's got the hot hand or is the best three shooter in the league, who might be the MVP of the season, this is your chance to turn that knowledge into cash. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us in tonight's episode as we're chatting a little bit ahead of Winnipeg's game against the Anaheim Ducks. This Ducks team has been a lot more impressive than I think a lot of folks were expecting. Anaheim under Quenneville has been high pace, high tempo, and frankly, they've just been kind of beaten up on teams that you wouldn't ordinarily think they would defeat. You know, yesterday they beat the Stars 7-5, which is pretty crazy. Now, let me get this out of the way immediately, right? The Ducks are probably putting on some pretty unsustainable numbers offensively. There's just no way that all of these guys are going to be shooting like 30% the whole year. It's crazy what this team is doing against good opponents and even bad teams. Pretty much everyone they're just kind of dismantling. But I think the bigger storyline here is that they are finally playing a system and style that suits the young talent this team has. Cutter Gauthier has like 11 goals on the season. Leo Carlson has 6 goals and has been one of the most dominant top 6 centers in the Pacific Division. Kreider already almost to 10 goals on the season. Troy Terry, double digits in points. You're seeing a lot of performances from, you know, a lot of these young and older players. Zellweger getting, some goals here. Ian Moore scoring his first from the back end. This Ducks team has a lot of firepower to work with. And coming into this game on Sunday, Anaheim will have Kreider, Carlson, and Terry up front. This has been one of the most dangerous top lines in the league right now, and I don't expect that to change. You've got Gauthier, McTavish, and Seneke on your second line. This is a super talented trio, probably your eventual future, maybe first line if you change out Carlson with McTavish. There's a ton of talent in this top 6. And for the Jets, this might be an interesting matchup because the Jets don't really have a second line that quite aligns to this group. If Perfetti comes back, that starts to change things. But this is a fast, talented young group. I think it's going to be a very challenging matchup for the Jets. But one thing I will say is this. When it comes to forecheck and will, Winnipeg tends to win those battles. And against this top 6, that might be what you have to do to slow them down. Don't be afraid to maybe get a little handsy, be more physical. I think that's where the Jets can try and grind out a win here because once you start getting towards the Ducks' bottom 6, you'll start to see that their depth is not exactly top end. Nestorenko, Paling, and Killorn anchor their third line, and then Johnston, Harkins, and Vetrano anchor the fourth. Now, don't get me wrong, guys like Vetrano and Nestorenko have been very productive, but this is not an elite bottom 6. And this is where, maybe the Ducks are a little top heavy. You'll also notice that defensively, they are not the most resolute. They've got some really top players like Lacombe. Hellison's been solid. Zellweger is a very talented young player. Trouba is playing resurgent hockey. Michukov and Moore have some real promise as potential, second or third pairing guys. So there's a lot to work with here. And in net, of course, they're all backed by Dostal and Mrazek, but this unit also just doesn't defend super well. They concede a fair number of chances, and a lot of their best work kind of comes more in the offensive zone than the defensive zone. So for the Jets, when you have some of the top goaltending in the league, and you have a really aggressive forecheck, and one that, against the Sharks right now has really been winning a lot of those physical duels, this might be how you can get a game against the Ducks. Anaheim is really good. They have a record that's about on par with the Jets. They have beaten up on some quality opponents that Winnipeg has struggled with. And so I think this is going to be a hard game. But if I have to predict a final scoreline, I will give it to... who do I want to say here? I think my gut says Anaheim edges the Jets out, but I'm going to say 4-3 Winnipeg. I don't know why. It's probably a little irrational, but I just think the Jets have that veteran savvy and experience, plus the goaltending, that might be enough to make a difference. That said, how they've kind of performed against the Sharks really isn't doing wonders for my argument right now. I'll say this, though. I think they've been a little bit unlucky against San Jose. I think against the Ducks, hopefully, after tonight's eventual win, should it be that, the Jets get that confidence to shoot the lights out and get past the Stahl or Mrazek, whoever's in net. So, yeah, I'm feeling good about this game. It should be fun. I think regardless of the final scoreline, it's just cool to see teams like the Sharks and the Ducks do well. The Pacific Division has really been two teams in Vegas and Edmonton, right? And, only one of those teams recently has had a lot more success. So I think it's just nice to see that there might finally be some competition, some more dilution for the playoff pool, maybe take out some points out of those other opponents and give the Western Conference a little more competitive depth up and down. So should be a fun season ahead. Looking forward to, the end of this Sharks game and the Ducks game. Let me know your score predictions for both of these. Drop those in the comments below or at my social medias at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's episode, that's going to be all the time that we have. Next week, we'll talk about how the Sharks game ended and how the Jets handled the Ducks. I'm hoping to report on 2 wins. We will find out in just a couple of days. But like I said, that's all the time that I've got for tonight. See you next week. Have a great night. And as always, go Jets go.